right. Well, when you said we should do Firefighters, I was like, have we not done Firefighters?
I mean, it's part of like the magic list, right? Of like which is sorted, by the way, into like jobs and, and then like we're just sort of sometimes we're like, what are we going to do? And something magically rises up to the surface because one of us is like, that's.
Well, did you know, Jen, that I am like a firefighter romance person? Did you know that?
I did not know that. See?
Man, I'm so basic. I love. Okay, firefighter is the empirically sexiest uniform. I'm sorry, everybody. But that's just the way it is. People who run into burning buildings to save people are like the romance heroes of our time. I have met many a firefighter. I appreciate this isn't necessarily the truth of what's underneath the uniform, but
in romance world,
I will never forget. My daughter was like just walking. So like, I don't know, 18, like under 2. And we had a grocery store with a parking lot in walking distance to our house. And so like every day to like get her walking, we would walk the 1.5 blocks to our grocery store in New York City and like buy like a baked potato and whatever for dinner. Right. And I will never forget. Oh, welcome everyone to Fated Mates. I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels and I write them.
And I'm Jennifer Prokop, a romance reader and editor.
And now,
without further ado,
talk about Firefighters. And so I will never forget, we came out of the grocery store with our like little bag of whatever it was. And there was a fire truck parked in the parking lot because they were doing their shop, their grocery shop. And they all piled out in uniform, not in like full uniform, but they had the like suspenders and the big pants and and the t-shirts that say FDNY. And there were maybe 6 of them. And they started walking across the parking lot and they all were like, hey to her. And she was like, like I could see on her face. She's like, oh my God.
What's happening?
This is the greatest moment of my 2-year-old life.
Amazing.
And I could see she was just like, this is the greatest.
This is cool.
She had that like firefighter moment.
Yes.
And I feel like for me, I still have that firefighter moment because I cannot process the idea of like...
Yeah, that being your job.
This 32-story building is aflame and I'm going to go in.
I feel like I'm sure I've told this story before because it's like there's something about this story that's really like memorable in my family because for my husband no longer does this, but for a while he was a teacher, like that's how we met. And then for a while, like we actually worked at the same school for a while in Berkeley in California, in this tiny little school. And he eventually became an administrator and now has just like moved on entirely, but I'm still teaching middle school. But anyway, we worked at this little middle school in Berkeley that is no longer existing, run by a woman who had no business running any kind of business,
let alone a school.
Like she had great ideas, but like literally there were parents who would be like, I just want her to cash my tuition checks. You know what I mean? Like,
oh my God.
Or like one time, like our health insurance just got canceled because she forgot to pay that bill. Like it was really honestly
Yikes.
I was like, I can no longer work for a person like this. This is why I have a job, actually, to feel certain. And anyway, so this school, though, was like a newer building. I think it was built by a church who was like renting it out. And so it was kind of this, and we call like your school, like sometimes fire drills get pulled or whatever. And the art teacher was this older woman who would always get like really excited. She would say, those hunky Berkeley firemen are coming. Hunky. Like, you know what I mean? And even to this day.
You know what, though? Hunky is a good word for a firefighter.
Yes. Like, and and she would, and so even like my husband still be like, remember how much she loved when the firemen would come? And I was like, those hunky Berkeley firemen. you know? And so, yeah, it was actually really funny. One time we called because we were sure there was a gas leak. And they came and they did a lot of testing because, you don't really fool around when it's a school.
Right.
And they were like, it's just body odor. It's the body odor of 13-year-olds. Like that smell you smell is just, it's a poorly ventilated building. And
I have a similar story. So I was living in Brooklyn and I was living above a restaurant, and my carbon monoxide detector was going off, and it was going off in like the way that carbon monoxide detectors go off, not when it's like a battery situation, but like it was like you have a carbon monoxide leak in your house.
Yeah.
So I called 311, which is our information line, and I said, I'm not sure if this is an emergency, but like, what do I do? And they were like, you need to call 911. Hang up right now and call 911. So I did. And a full-on dressed, suited, like team of firemen arrived with their siren on outside of my apartment, which is, everyone just know that if your apartment is not on fire and this happens, it's highly embarrassing because you're like, everything in here is fine. Nobody needs to be concerned. And up the stairs, 3 flights, come these like, a team, like I don't know, 5 of them. And they come into the house and I'm holding my dog. And the guy, the like captain of this team, like walks through my house with a carbon monoxide detector and is like, you do not have a carbon monoxide leak. And I was like, okay, but why is I was like, so what do I do? And he goes, maybe change the batteries. And I was like, oh no. I mean, and I was like, 25.
And you're just like, I'm going to die now. Thank you.
And like, this is not like the middle of nowhere. We are going to talk today about some middle of nowhere firemen who like have the time for this. But like, this is New York City. Like, surely these men had something else to do with themselves.
Yes, of course.
But they did not. That moment, they were in my apartment making me feel bad. I mean, for what it's worth, they were perfectly fine. But like, definitely, like, I was the 18th 22-year-old who had summoned them to her house for no reason.
Yes. And they were just like,
you should have called your dad. Who would have told you to change the battery.
We're all young and in our first apartments at some point, and the hunky Berkeley firemen everywhere are there to support us. When your kids are little, you take them to the local fire station and they sit in the, there is a vibe to firemen that just cops don't have, right? I mean, nobody is running around saying all firemen are bastards, right? I mean, so I think that's the other thing. This feels like a public, it's public service without, I don't know, without everything that comes with policing, right? Yeah. And so I think there's a way in which we transfer all of our, people, they're brave people who have to make society work.
Well, it also does feel heroic, right?
Yeah,
like, there's
truly,
I don't know, does Chicago do this dumb, like, everybody has a name thing? So in New York, it's like the police officer, so the NYPD is New York's finest, and then the police department is the fire department is New York's bravest. And I'm always like, New York's bravest. Like, that's really that's the vibe you want.
That's the vibe. Yeah, of course.
And no, and then there are a bunch of others, like the correctional officers are New York's boldest, and like, fuck those guys. But like, it's everybody has their like superlative. Yeah, New York's bravest feels right to me. And so I think like there's something in here that's like, do you have firemen I was thinking about before we started, like, I was like, who are the firefighters like in the world, like in the media world who we like think about? And I think about that book, that movie when we were growing up, we had that movie Backdraft. Do you remember Backdraft? And it was like,
yes,
I can still see the previews for that and feeling like, oh, and it was it Alec Baldwin?
Kurt Russell?
I'm going to Google it right now.
Well, and the thing I vividly remember, and it was funny because I was thinking about this too, is like, do you remember the scene where like they pull up and the fire hydrant is behind some like rich guy's car?
Set in Chicago.
Yeah. And they like basically like break through the guy's car window to get to the, you know what I mean, to the hydrant or whatever.
Uh-huh. Listen, all right. Directed by Ron Howard, starring Kurt Russell, William Baldwin, and Robert De Niro. And it's two Chicago firefighter brothers who have to work together. They don't like each other, and they have to work together to find a dangerous arsonist.
Of course. Yeah.
Jennifer Jason Leigh, Rebecca De Mornay. This is really like a who's who of 1991.
Yes. Well, I mean, so for sure, like, I think that like they make great movies, right? There's Chicago Fire, a TV show. Like, there's a bunch of shows that are like Chicago Fire,
and
Chicago
that
Med.
Paramount Plus
That Paramount Plus show.
Wait,
I was just going to say.
What is the name of that Paramount Plus show that advertised on the podcast? And the head writer.
And it was so great. It was like something Med.
Sky Med.
Sky Med, right.
Which is a very fun, that's set in Canada, and it's extremely fun. It's about like the personal lives of like the pilots and nurses who fly air ambulances. So it's like it's more EMT than firefighter, but
right.
in Canada.
A lot of that job seems to go hand in hand in a way I don't really understand.
Yeah, there's some connection. EMTs are also a part of this. Well, because the firefighters, the hunky firefighters climb the stairs in all their gear and like lift people in firefighter carry down the stairs out to a car, a van, no, an ambulance. Sorry, the proper term is ambulance, where then like other people save them. It's a 1-2 punch of heroicism.
Yeah, I would say I'm also, and this is the part where you really want to, I'm fascinated by like wildlife firefighting, which of course in our modern world of climate
smoke
change,
jumpers,
right, has become even more dramatic, right? I mean, like there's a whole thing about like how they have those emergency tents. Do you know about this?
No.
Okay, so if you are firefighting in like a wildlife area, one of your pieces of equipment, I guess, is this kind of emergency tent, and it's like an emergency fire shelter, I guess. Okay.
Oh, and it's like you can zip yourself into it.
It's basically like you make yourself into a little burrito in this thing. And then the fire, but it's basically like the fire is going to go over you. You can't escape it.
So you just are there until it's over?
Yeah. And essentially it's like it will protect your life it'll like kind of trap in the breathable air you need and keep you from keep the gases out. At the same time, it somehow prevents the fire from killing you.
Jen, it's like the ultimate only one sleeping bag.
Yeah, but it literally, I don't want to even make it sexy because I don't think it is. Like, if there's only one and there's only one person, yeah. And so this is like a new,
Apologies for that.
I know, I'm sorry, everybody. Like, I was
Jen, you love a sleeping bag.
I know, but in this case,
okay.
You're really it's a one-man thing. There's no joking around with it. So I also was reading this article that it's like, there's something really terrible. I mean, I want to be honest about this, right? Like there are prisons.
I was just going to say this in California.
Prisoners. Yes, right? There's inmate firefighter
it's not,
programs.
Quote, forcing, but they essentially offer incarcerated people, the opportunity to learn how to fight wildfires. And then if they join these wildfire fighting teams, they get time off their sentence. There was a huge piece about this in the Times or the Post a couple of years ago.
Yeah, but there's also a huge piece of it in political reviews and things talking about how essentially unjust it is. They weren't paying people what they were supposed to pay.
Of course.
Oh, I mean,
and also sending people into the training is not exactly high quality training either. They're basically sending these people without any quality training into and promising them freedom with it.
So
which is terrible.
This past summer there was a bunch of really interesting articles. One at the Marshall Project, which is about criminal justice. So I mean, this is also one of those things where it's It's fascinating.
Listen, the prison industrial complex is fucking terrible. And
it's gonna. Yes,
that's our stance here at Faded Mates.
There's our theme. So, I mean, anyway, it's like really interesting the way that, because this is such a desperate need out west, right? The way that like firefighting is very different when you're talking about being dropped into an active firefight, like forest fire, essentially.
Yep.
Or wildfire. So, yeah, I mean, it's just basically, I don't know. It's there's a lot there. And I think most of the romances, of course, are not really dealing with that, right? Like most of the romances that I've read are dealing with instead, like either.
Well, wait, if we're going to just we should clear the table then on the problematic pieces here, right?
Yeah, right.
The other thing is that this is a real white subgenre.
Yeah, I mean, like, I could think of
many of the uniformed subgenres. This is a very white one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
And I don't know the statistics on
like the actual,
profession, like demographics of firefighting. Although, I'm certain that it's not a very white job here in New York City. I mean, there are many white people who, it's probably majority white, but like there are a lot of men and women of color in New York City who work for the fire department.
Well, I think that's the other thing that I think is really interesting is it seems to be a subgenre where, like, if there is a woman doing the job, it's like she's the only one. And therefore, right?
Yeah.
And that I'm also really interested in. Like, is that the case that, most firefighting teams are made up predominantly of men or, right? Like, so, like, there's a way in which I'm not sure if the kind of politics that are often at play in these books are the same as they are in real life, right?
According to the United States Fire Administration, which is, a part of FEMA, look at me, clickety-clacking over here. 5% of all career firefighters are women.
Okay.
And 11% of all volunteer firefighters are women. And 12% of federal wildland firefighters, I don't know what that means, are women. So... yeah, so the odds are she is the only one.
Yeah. Well,
in New York City, less than 2% of firefighters are women. Now, I saw this thing the other day. I don't know, it made me mad about how
See,
women...
that's funny. I saw this thing, it made me mad. I feel like that's usually my line, but okay, you go.
It made me mad. And it was like about how women, it was an incendiary TikTok or Instagram or something that I was like supposed to get mad at. It was for the clicks, right?
Right.
And I did get mad, but I did not click. And it said like women need men because the majority of firefighters, the majority of police officers are men. The majority of firefighters are men, right? The majority of construction workers are men. And I was like, this is dumb. This is dumb on a number of levels. But here's the thing is like, if like in New York City, only 2% of all firefighters are women, like no wonder that statistic stands. Like who wants to go be one of 2% of women firefighters? Like you have to be a very particular and like tremendous kind of person to want to do that. But I do feel like this is the place for me to talk about what might be what I believe is one of the best firefighter romances out there.
This week's episode is sponsored by 1001 Dark Nights, publisher of Dylan Allen's The Wild Card.
So River's Wild series is a very, very popular one. And this new book or this new story is a neighbors to lovers second chance billionaire romance. Listen, Dylan knows the job.
Amazing.
Our hero, Leo, is a billionaire with family secrets looking for a fresh start. He has two priorities. He's back in town, ready to put down new roots and make up for old mistakes. And he absolutely does not have time in that schedule for a blind date with his new neighbor until he discovers that his new neighbor is not a stranger. She is Cassie, the one who got away.
I love it.
But Jen, Cassie is a reformed jewel thief. Thank you. Very excited about this. She has finally paid her debts. She is ready to come back to town and live the life she has always wanted. Her new neighbor sounds like a perfect opportunity for that new life. He sounds great. She's very up for a blind date. Except, oh no, he turns out to be
someone she can't trust, right?
Who promised her the world and then disappeared without a trace. Now, He wants to pick up where they left off. She wants absolutely none of that, only to keep her distance. I don't think it's going to work out for Cassie because they are...
Because Leo is obsessed with her. He's going to make it work.
He's obsessed. Exactly. Their chemistry is undeniable and just flames everywhere.
All right. If you would like to read this second chance contemporary romance with a billionaire single dad, a heist, a destination, and an obsessed hero, and who wouldn't, please check out The Wild Card by Dylan Allen. If your podcasting app supports it, you can look down right now and click on the chapter title, and you can have it in your hot little hands right now as we speak. Thanks to 1001 Dark Nights for sponsoring this week's episode.
Let's just jump right in. It's Kate Meter.
Like when you say firefighter romances, that's like immediately what I think of.
That's the first one. So it's called Hot in Chicago, and Jen likes it probably because Kate is also from Chicago, and so she gets the city right. Which is, you know, a piece of the puzzle always in these like city-based ones. Okay, so the first one, so this my
They're all
favorite
good.
one is number 2, but there you should just read it from the beginning. There are a couple of novellas in there. So the first one is called Flirting with Fire, and I'm starting with the first one just because it like has this great moment for the second one that really like tees up the second one in this like perfect way. Okay, she's the assistant press secretary to the mayor, and like the mayor in this book this series is like charismatic and hunky. Like very sexy and great, and like not like any city mayors, honestly, ever, but it's Romancelandia mayors. And she's the press secretary, and the hero is the one of a family of I think 5. They're called the Firefighting apostrophe Dempseys, and they are a family of foster siblings who are now all firefighters. And there are 4 men and a woman.
Yes.
And in the first book, the mayor has like some like significant donor, like very, very wealthy donor who drives a Lamborghini and like parks in front, similarly, like in front of a fire hydrant, or like parks somewhere where he can't be parked. And the second book's heroine, the firefighting Dempsey, firefighting Dempsey, her name is Alexandra, and she is like there ready to like she like breaks the window of his Lamborghini, or like cuts off the door. I can't remember.
Yeah,
what,
like it's like Jaws of Life kind of scenario,
like,
right? Yeah,
destroys this Lamborghini, the Lamborghini of like the highest paying donor to the mayor's like re-election campaign, and the mayor is like, "What the fuck?" And she's like, "Well, he shouldn't have parked." Like, I don't know what to say to you.
Well, and it's like captured on video, which of course it's funny because of course now that's what would happen. She would become this like TikTok star.
Yeah.
So like looking back, it felt like it was smart. Like essentially it becomes a sensation to see this like beautiful fire woman, right? Yeah. Essentially like busting open this car, right?
Yep. And so in the second one is Alex's book. And Alex and Eli, so Eli is the name of the mayor, and they are he is just like, she is a hot shot. Like she's a wild card. She's, you know, going to get everybody in trouble because she just plays with fire. That's the name of the book, Playing with Fire. And he can't stand her, and she really can't stand him.
Yeah.
But then she has to save his life.
It's great. Like it's a Drake.
Yeah. And so she shows up and she has to save his life. And I think she gives him mouth to mouth. Like she
puts him in a carry or something, right?
She literally has to save his life. And there are pictures, and like suddenly Chicago is like, look at how like sexy the mayor is, and look at Chicago's like so drawn to this story.
Right.
And like at the same time, she's dealing with the very serious issues of being one of only 2% of women in the Chicago Fire Department. And part of the reason why it works so well is because she's like, being in a public relationship with the fucking mayor is exactly the kind of thing that like people people don't care about what I do. They think of me as like that girl, that pretty girl who like is just like an adorable mascot for the fire department. And like, that's not what she wants. She wants to be taken seriously, just like all of her brothers. And she deserves to be like, this woman runs into burning buildings to save people. Like, that's her job. And she just wants the respect due to it. But like, instead, now she's like this like sex pot, mayor's girlfriend. I will say this, there is some of the hottest, like, there's a scene where like she goes to his house or he goes, I forget whose house they're in, but like the door kicks closed behind them when they walk in, and it is like
it's
on. The flames are real. But read the first one first. Like, do yourself a favor and like commit to 2.
And she, I think, has to like prove herself to her brothers, prove herself to the city, right? Like, I think there's a whole bit about like her physical readiness. Like, she's really tall. She's a big woman, right? You'd have to be to kind of do the physical requirements of the job. And that's a part that, she really struggles with, like this feeling of like, wait, this is what's going to keep me back from having my brother's respect and being a part of, so it's like really, the whole thing about it is it's like she's from a foster family where like firefighting is an identifier. Right. So like her like kind of figuring out like if this is the identity of my family and it's something I also want to do. It's great. It's like it's a terrific book. It really is. Yeah. That whole series is awesome.
Super fun. And then she went back to it, right? Like she wrote the first series, Hot in Chicago, and then she wrote a bunch of other things. She's written a hockey series for my hockey girlies out there, but and then I think she went back and wrote another Hot in Chicago, like rookie firefighter series.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
So like if you're a firefighter reader,
girly, yeah.
this is for you. This whole series will really work for you, I think.
Yeah. There's also, there's a Shannon Stacy kind of family of firefighters.
Families of firefighters are big.
Yeah. And I've read those. I think Shannon Stacy writes a really solid romance, right? Like you're going to get what you want. And there's like, it's like Boston Fire. I think it's all where it takes place.
Mm-hmm.
I am trying to remember the one I really like. And I think the one that I liked in that was, I think it was called Heat Exchange. I'm kind of looking at them. It's one where Lydia, again, I like sort of the women in these stories. She's not a firefighter, but her her dad was, her brother was, her ex-husband was. And she goes back home to kind of like help. I can't remember why she left, but like she has to go back home. She's going to help her dad. They own a bar. All these firefighters. Same thing with the Dempseys.
A real crossover.
Right. And
was that Irish thing?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And falls in love with her brother's friend who is also a firefighter. Right. But like she's been down that road before. I also find this like a really compelling story.
Wait,
like,
who is this?
This is Heat Exchange by Shannon
Stacy.
So this is like another family.
Is this the one where she's like sworn off firefighters?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
She's like, I've been down this road.
I can't do that.
But of course, right. Like, and I love those stories. Like there's a great one where the woman's first husband was a race car driver and she falls in love with another race car driver. Like, and I get that, right? Like this is...
I've sworn off
yes,
F1.
Right? Like well, in this case, I think her husband died. It wasn't F1, but he had died in a car accident.
Yeah.
Driving.
Terrible.
So like the kind of... So I think that's the other thing. Like the part of the reason we like these books, Sarah, is because they're high stakes by definition.
Yep.
Right?
These people could die anytime they go to work.
Yes.
And that is terrifying. And I do not. My husband is definitely not going to die every day he goes to work.
Right. Right.
So,
like, die of shock over some dumb thing we said on the podcast, maybe, but not quite the same.
There is... Yeah, but you hit on something else, which is the family piece of things. Like, I grew up, my best friend in high school, her dad was a firefighter, and both of her brothers then became firefighters. And like, I think this family thing is real. Like, this is a real family job. In like a really old-fashioned kind of way.
Yeah, like the first Nepo babies.
Yeah, well, and a real union job, right?
Yes,
like, so there is a real sense of like,
true.
Also, a kind of sense that like firefighters understand, right? Like what there's, and so the world becomes very sort of small, and even in these books that are big city set books, right? The world is very small because like I think marrying into firefighting is probably, if for somebody who doesn't understand the job, like understand the threat of it, is probably very
like
shocking.
Cultural almost, like, right? Like a culture shift for you. Yeah.
Exactly. So I really love that setup. But I think that that's why so many of these series are family series.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's obviously has its own appeal, right? Can I talk about another one? And I meant to go back and reread it. I think you like Lauren Rowe, right? Have you read?
I do like Lauren Rowe. Yeah.
Have you read Hero by her?
Maybe. Okay. Probably. Tell me
Hero,
more.
Yeah, exactly. In Hero, and like content warning on this, because I actually went back and reread the beginning because I was like, it starts with the heroine's name is Lydia. And the book starts like sort of like some years earlier, right? Like, but it's like on page where she's like a physical therapist and her husband is a firefighter and he dies on the line, in the line of duty.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this really like it's like her rushing to the hospital and being told, by the doctor, like he's brain dead, he's gone. And and so it starts off this really traumatic opening. And I think they have a baby or a young child. And then it's like, then it kind of, so we get a couple of chapters, I think, of her essentially like being, like kind of dealing with this. Yep. And then I think we get like sort of a chapter, the next, so there's like the first 3 chapters, and I don't know if it says like how long it is, but then chapter 4 picks up, it's like present day, and we get Colby, who is Colby Morgan. I think it's like the Morgan brothers again, or it's like the series. I don't think they're all firefighters, but this one is. And it starts off with him, getting in, he's like literally in a fire, right? Like, again, I think one of the things that I think is really memorable about this book to me is, I will be honest, many of my firefighter books never actually have them fighting the fire. And, it's like, it's their job, but we very rarely see it on page, like them actually doing it. And so there's, and I mean, I want to say it's pretty early. It's probably, his second or third chapter, he's in a fire and he rescues a woman and a baby and ends up in the ICU.
Oh, I have read this one.
Yes. Right. Ends up in the ICU. And then Lydia is like the physical therapist assigned to work with him. So you get like, right in the first, like, I mean, literally, perfect. Like it's like the whole setup, you can see like her dilemma and struggle. She watched her husband, literally die from this. And now here is this new fireman, like in the ICU, and it's her job to be sort of working with him. So like the entire setup is one of like, I've experienced this loss before and there's no way.
Yeah, I don't want to do it again.
Yeah, but there they are, Colby and Lydia. Can't resist each other.
Amazing.
So this one, I think, is, I mean, it has that setup of like the grieving widow who has to find love against the man who is also lives a dangerous life to her, and then, but also the more firefighting action on page in this one, I would say.
Amazing.
Not just breaking into Lamborghinis. So that's Hero by Lauren Rowe.
Yeah, I like Lauren Rowe because I feel like she's a real feelings writer. Like she spends a lot of time setting up her characters, like in a way that is like kind of old school. Like I really love that she takes the time to do it.
Yeah, and my guess is this book is 2018. I'm gonna say, yeah. I was like, I remember reading this kind of right when I first started like reviewing and kind of was like back in romance in that way. So that makes sense. Yeah.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Joe Brenner, author of Meet Me in the Dark, the third book in the Bad Heroes series.
Now, this is a real classic dark romance trilogy. It is also a why choose. So we have 3 really hot, gorgeous Navy SEALs, Micah, Luke, and Connor. They are best friends and lovers and absolutely ruthless when it comes to getting what they want. And what do they want? Kara. Micah,
poor girl,
right? Exactly. They kidnap her. They're determined to never let her go, but they also have enemies with like that essentially want to bring them down. Their Navy SEAL careers ended in a bit of a like they were set up essentially, right? And so their good names have been maligned. And
Perfect.
So, they're on the run. So this is like a story that really taps into all the things that you love about dark romance, right? Like sort of the world, the sense of lawlessness, and that it's these people together against everyone. And Kara is a great heroine. She's really strong and determined to essentially, like, if she's going to have these men have them on her own terms. This series is now complete with the 3rd book, but you definitely have to go back to the 1st book and start reading there. And book 3 really expands the HEA and the sense of them working together as a foursome, although this series does a really good job of showing each of them as individuals and their kind of relationships with each other too. It's super spicy, super sexy, and has all of the big feelings that you would expect in a why choose romance.
This is a dark romance, so check content warnings at joebrenner.com and find it in print, ebook, and with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited. If your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the title of the ad that you are looking at right now on your phone, and it'll take you directly to Amazon to purchase the book. Thanks to Joe Brenner for sponsoring this week's episode. So what's interesting to me about Firefighters is there was this time period, this is like kind of, God, maybe the late aughts or like early 10s, where all the firefighter romances were also romantic suspense. Like there was that it sort of did that double duty of like, there was an arsonist and, and, not to put too fine a point on the Susan Elizabeth Phillips thing she always says, which is like, if your hero is a firefighter, your heroine has to be an arsonist.
Right.
I have not read that book. I don't know if that book exists, but like, it's a good point about conflict. But I think what so many of these series did in that like very particular time was like establish 2 characters and then like the relentless threat of arson or like some kind of criminal activity that would put them in danger, right?
Right.
This is the way I feel about, you said you were talking about racing books earlier, but like I feel like in many ways for me the premise of a firefighting romance is like at some point someone is going to be in a fire.
Yeah.
Right? And like harmed or really like a real threat of harm.
Yeah.
Right. This comes from my own sort of love of those old historicals where like they'd be thatching a roof in a like old medieval town and then there would be a fire and the hero would have to go in and like lift a burning, thing off of a heroine to save her. Right. So anyway, I want to talk about 2 series for that. If this is your thing. The first is Kayla Perrin's Passion Ignited. So the series is, I think, called Love on Fire, because of course it is. Yeah. This is the one thing I will say about this. I literally was trying to remember the name of the book today, and I listed like 6 other firefighting romances before I got to the appropriate title for like they're all play on the words fire. Yeah, right. But this is Kayla Perrin's Love on Fire series. It's an old Kamani series that was published in 2014. Okay. And the 3rd book in the series, which is Passion Ignited, is hero Omar, what he became. He's like a not late in life but like later career firefighter. Like he was part of like a family business, but now he's decided that like his true calling is firefighting. And there's an arsonist in the town where they are. And there's a journalist. I love a journalist, Gabrielle. And Gabrielle is the journalist who's like chasing after this. She is also looking for this arsonist. And this is set in San Francisco. And basically, like, these two end up being kind of like, they like resist working together, but of course they end up working together also because they're both super hot and, you know, they can't resist each other.
Right.
But then as part of it, like there's a romantic suspense piece to this where Gabrielle becomes a target of the arsonist because she is getting closer and closer. And Omar, like, has no choice but to like protect, like, mentally has no choice but to protect her at all times. And it's very hot. And so that's Kayla Perrin's Passion Ignited. You can read that one without reading the other two. It's just if you love it, there are two others in the series also about firefighters in San Francisco. And that made me think of Jill Shalvis, who I feel like...
I was like, of course, Jill Shalvis must have a firefighting.
She has multiples, right? Like, so... Jill Shalvis, for like a minute and a half, wrote a series about, wrote like a full-on firefighter series. It was literally called Firefighter. And each one of them was romantic suspense. And the one that I like the best, my favorite in the series, is Seeing Red. Where the heroine, again, romantic suspense, Summer is the heroine, and her father died, I don't know, a decade ago in a warehouse fire. And like, she just took off. She was like, I can't even be in this town anymore. But now, like, it's 10 years later and there's a second fire at the warehouse, and she comes back to like help her mom, like, do like for romance reasons. And she gets back, and the fire marshal is Owen. No, I'm sorry. The fire marshal is Joe, who, like, they were like basically like wild for each other. They were best friends, and he had this like unrequited love for her 10 years earlier. And then she took off and like left him alone, like no real, she went like kind of no contact. And now she's back, and he's like, I still have all these like pent up, like I'm feeling all these feelings again, and I can't. Like, he's like a classic Shalvis hero. Yeah. And this arsonist is back, and then it's again like anywhere that's important to Summer is being set on fire, and so like the two of them are like racing against time to catch the arsonist to save the day. Okay. So that's Seeing Red by Jill Shalvis. But Jill Shalvis, while I'm on here, I just want to say Jill Shalvis also has like these not old fashioned, but like those classic Harlequin desires.
Oh yeah, right.
About where like he's wearing suspenders and no shirt. He's very oiled up.
Sure.
He's also wearing like a fireman's hat.
Sure, that's how it works.
Listen, if I were dating a fireman, would I make him wear no shirt, suspenders, and a hat? I absolutely would.
Lube him up first, though. Don't forget that important part.
Yeah, just oiled. The first one
seems safe.
But oil on, that's definitely flammable. I could not tell you the plot of any of these books, but I do remember that they are called Flashpoint and Flashback. Yeah.
Sure.
There is a third one, and I cannot remember the name of that one either. But I will tell you that instead of wearing a fireman's hat in that one, he is wearing a Santa hat, and it is a holiday romance.
A+. Listen, God, he's got such nice things.
Like the Harlequin Desire art team is like, I know, we'll make it.
You. Don't worry, everyone. Don't you worry about a thing.
He is still in the dark, oiled up, wearing suspenders and a hat, but it is a Santa hat.
Amazing. I would like to talk about...
check show notes. I will find that cover. Yeah. I hope it's a Jill Shalvis cover, because it should be. Yeah.
I would like to talk about Blue Smoke by Nora Roberts.
A classic.
It is a classic. And this is this is also one of those books that has... Okay, every romance reader has had this experience of vividly remembering a scene from a book completely out of the context of anything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it takes, you're constantly like, where was that scene? And sometimes you can never find it. Me in the sleeping bag. Right. So I don't know if everybody, the reason anytime someone brings up a sleeping bag is because I vividly remember this book where these two people had been out in the wilderness for some reason, and they finally get back to like sort of civilization, and they are like being hosted by some blah, blah, blah people. And the guy like sneaks back to their kind of tent and zips their sleeping bags together and then kind of makes it like, oh, the people must have done it. They thought we were together. And then he like admits to her like, no, I did it because I knew it would be our last night together. I cannot find this book anywhere. And I've looked kind of where for years I've been looking for this book. Okay. Anyway, in Blue Smoke, Rena is and this is a romantic suspense, but I would also say it's like definitely like a thriller. Like this is one of those books where, and I think Nora like still writes books like this. Her latest Identity, not her latest, the second to latest one, I would argue is very much like this, where there's a bad guy who's like a psychopath, sort of, we're in his point of view every once in a while. This is a killer who's determined to get her. And she comes from I think it starts off with her as a kid, but she is an arson investigator, right? And the scene that I remember most vividly, and you're kind of like, why was this a scene I remember, is she goes to investigate a kitchen fire. And a woman had essentially like there really had legitimately been a fire in the kitchen. But this woman sort of realizes that if she like helps it along a little bit, that she can get like the insurance payout and renovate the kitchen. And Rena, of course, like comes along and realizes that something about the way the fire happened was not natural. Like it got helped at some point and then put out, and then they were called. And I remember the scene because like she's essentially telling the husband, like, your wife did this. You know what I mean? And so it's like, you're like, oh my God, she's an arson investigator and breaking up marriages. Right?
Doing the Lord's work.
Right? Like, she's just like, I can't lie about this. Like, I cannot say that it started as an accident, but then whatever. So this was the scene for years and years and years. I was like, what was that book? And I was like, oh, it's Blue Smoke by Nora Roberts. So Rena is an arson investigator, and, there's a psychopathic arsonist out for her. And, you kind of, if I remember correctly, kind of know all along who it is. It's someone, she grew up with who was like torturing animals down the block or something.
It's always somebody that they
know. Right. Well, because that's it. It's like, these are books where, I mean, it's funny because sometimes when you go back and read old reviews to be like, wait, was it? And it was on Dear Author. There's this review that points out like the difference between a mystery and a thriller is like a mystery when you're really like, you don't know who's causing it, but these are thrillers. Like it's really like, what's going to happen next, and how is he going to come after her, and like what is going to be the violence that happens as due to it.
Sure.
The thing that was really hard about this book, I'd totally repressed and forgotten, is that the hero's name, it's her next door neighbor, is Bo Goodnight. And I was like, I'm sorry. Bo.
Well, here's the other thing.
Right.
There are
like
a lot of
years ago. Yeah.
And also like these tend to be characters whose names are like I just talked about one called Joe.
Right.
They're like
dudes. They're just guys.
They're just people.
Jack Reacher style. They're just guys.
They're just guys. Jack Reacher. Use the word guy a lot.
Yeah.
While you were doing this, I just want to update our listeners. I did look up, first of all, these Jill Shalvis books have been rejacketed, and that is unacceptable because now they have like couples wearing shirts on them.
Oh, I don't know. It's sad.
We're going to do you a solid and put the actual original Blaze covers.
I will. I almost always do when the photo arrays.
Desire. It's Blaze.
Of course
it's Blaze. Of course.
Silly me.
I still don't know. I have not looked at the descriptions of any of these books, but I'm going to tell you Flashpoint and Flashback. And then you can also get them on Amazon as a combo. I'm sure you can get them everywhere as a combo, but like they've reissued them as a combo. And that one does have a half-naked suspendered fireman on it because Harlequin knows what we want. That's called the Firefighters Anthology, obviously. Published under Harlequin Men of Courage.
Sure.
Listen, Harlequin knows the job. They just put the book out, name it what it deserves
what
to be
it
named
is.
Firefighters an Anthology. Let's just not think too hard about this. And then the third one is actually, it's 3 people. It's a holiday anthology from Blaze. It's called Heating Up the Holidays. And not only is he wearing a Santa hat, he is holding a candy cane fire pole.
Amazing. Like, listen.
I don't want anything more than that, romance.
No,
Stop trying so hard.
This is what I want. Absolutely. Absolutely. Amazing.
It's great. I can't wait for you all to see it. In fact, I'm going to say, look down at your podcasting app right now, and I'm going to hope that Eric has delivered and put this as the image for this.
I do the images, and it will be the image. I promise, everyone. I promise. Okay, I have more. Do you have more?
I have tons
where are we?
more.
Okay.
We need to keep. Well, how far into this? Oh my God, 45 minutes. We gotta get moving here.
Maybe we're gonna go to the lightning round, but that
All right, I have two. I have some novellas, and I have one that isn't really he is a firefighter, but we don't see fire really.
Okay. All right.
Where do you want to go?
I don't know. We're just gonna keep going.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk about Amy Lee's Set on You and save the sexy novellas for the end, for the lightning round.
So do that, and then I have one more novel, and then, yeah, okay. Yes, go. I have more, too, but go.
Yeah. Well, I could keep going. This could be a 2-hour one for me. Anyway, okay, so this is...
I didn't think I had that many, and then I was like, I have this.
You have read romance novels for way too long for you to only have Firefighters are everywhere when you're just thinking about it.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yes. There's also that Bella Andre series that I like so much, The Sullivans. One of them is a firefighter.
Of course.
That one's really fun because... there are 8 siblings in that family, and everyone, I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but every one of them is the top of their career. The greatest vintner in the United States, the greatest actor in the United States, a Major League Baseball player, NFL star.
Yes,
they're all just it's 8 kids, and every one of them is the greatest.
Can I tell you my true sadness?
San Francisco firefighter, and he has
of course
a penthouse apartment. I don't understand,
of
but
course
it doesn't matter.
Can I tell you my greatest sadness? I, of course, went to look at lists, and then sometimes books disappear, right? They were self-published, and then they get taken down.
Authors, what are you doing?
And it's so sad. And there was a book called, I was like, I'm reading the hell out of this, called Charmed by the Alien Vampire Fireman. And I'm really sad to report that it is no longer available.
Who's the author?
From Crimson, Crymsyn, Hart, Hart. And it is no longer available. And I was really sad. I was like, it's
if
a
you're
menage,
out there and you know Crimson Heart.
Vampire, alien, firefighter romance. And I was like, romance is so pure and good.
Exactly. They spun the Jessica Kane trope wheel, and they got to that.
The heroine's name was Ember.
Of course it was. Of course it was.
I just want you to know that I can find the chemtrails of it on the internet, but not it.
And pour one out for Crimson.
All right.
So if anybody's out there and knows Crimson, Jen wants to talk to her.
Yeah, I'll
Venmo
her $5.
Can we get to this serious book by Amy Lee, who's still writing?
Yes.
Okay. So last year, Amy Lee wrote her debut. It's called Set on You. It is very cute. This was in the heyday of the rom-com boom. So the heroine, Crystal Chen, is a curvy influencer, a fitness influencer. So she takes a bunch of videos of herself at the gym, doing reps and jumping around. Sure. And whatever. And she's great. And she's followed by thousands and thousands of people because she's about body positivity and you can be both fat and fit. And she's great. She's a really fun character. There is a guy who also works out at the gym and is always in her way, always using the squat rack when she needs to use it, or always they're just in a constant competitive battle for reps, and he's not gross, and it's not he's lovely. He's a hero. He is also a firefighter, Scott, and they have this kind of this gym repartee where they're always like, I can do 10 of those, like, well, I can do 12, like they're in a constant battle. Sure. And then they end up at their grandparents. Each of them their grandparents are getting married and they don't know. And then they get to their grandparents' engagement party and they discover that they're going to be related. Oh. And so it's very cute. And there's like a big family and it's very funny. And there's also like lots of body positivity in here. And like he's super into her from the jump. And he's also a firefighter. This is single POV, so we don't get much of Scott. So you're not going to get like a ton of firefighting experience here, but it's cute. And this is Amy Lee's debut. And I'm very glad she's here in romance.
Yeah, I think the second one might also have a firefighter based on the list I was reading.
I don't know. I haven't read it.
I think it's just coming out. Yeah.
I have it on my,
yeah.
Oh, no, it just came out. X's and O's.
It just came out. Right. X's and O's. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure
I guess them. So. Boston firefighter Trevor. So there you go. Yeah. The third one is a lobster fisherman. Adorable.
I love it.
Amy, I'm so excited you're here.
Can I just name check, since we are running into the end of the episode, that Anchored Hearts by Priscilla Oliveras. We had her on to talk about Second Chance Romance when this book came out back in season 3. He is the one who like left and like traveled the world as a photographer and comes home and finds that his Anna Maria Navarro is a firefighter and a paramedic, and also like sort of on the side does like personal training. And so like we talked about this book extensively back in season 3, but it's great. Priscilla writes a great romance. And I also like when we talked about at the beginning, like the idea of, I mean, obviously several of the ones I've talked about have been like the woman is the firefighter or the arson investigator or whatever. And so that is a whole one. And, you know, there's a bunch of cute stuff in the blurb about them rekindling the flame because Priscilla knows what's what. So I'm not going to say much more about it because we've talked about it pretty extensively, but it's Priscilla writes a great romance, and there you go.
So we're going to go from Priscilla, who writes closed door romances, to some hot ones. If that's okay. I want to talk, we've talked about this part. We did a deep dive on them. London Hale is like my favorite one-handed read, one of my favorite one-handed read teams. They don't write under London Hale anymore. It's very sad. But my favorite of all of their books is a book called Talk Dirty to Me, where the heroine is the mayor of this small town in like Washington State. And the hero is like a young rookie firefighter who moonlights as a phone sex operator. And they just like happen to have been having phone sex like for a while. And he realizes that like his favorite client is actually the mayor of the town in which he is a firefighter. Listen, again, all of this is romance reasons. This is not how phone sex and mayoring goes, I don't think, but it's a delight. And it's really sexy. And this is also, if you like older heroine, younger hero, this one's for you.
Yeah. Okay. I have a book I liked a lot called Strike a Match by Fiona Riley. And in this one, it's a lesbian romance. The firefighter Sasha. And she has been like a real, like a womanizer, essentially, like, right? Like she just like goes out and kind of has a lot of hookups and, you know, has had a great fun time, but is, I think, you know, kind of ready to, I don't know, like settle down. And so she actually hooks up with this dating service because and so that's like part of the series. It's called A Perfect Match novel, and A Perfect Match was the name of the dating service. And so they're both clients of the same matchmaker. Abby is the other woman. They've met at like social events and like mixers, but they this time they are essentially like meeting at a wedding. And, you know, it's like they have like a lot of chemistry. It's real sexy. They kiss, right? And, you know, this is like a book that has a lot of really good internal conflict for both of these women. So for Sasha, she is like hustling, working a bunch of jobs, like really like trying to kind of make ends meet. And there's a lot of medical debt in the family because her father had leukemia. And Abby, it turns out, is actually a millionaire. She's an heiress to some fancy Boston family, but she routinely lies about this because she has had like bad situations with gold diggers, right? And so she figures out pretty quickly that Sasha is not a gold digger, but also has sort of painted herself into a corner of not telling the truth about the fact that she has all this money, right? And so, one of the things that then happens is that Sasha is kind of makes judgmental comments about rich women when they're out, which Abby is hurt by. But what is she supposed to do? Because she can't exactly say, wait, that's me. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of conflict between them that is about class, which is actually pretty, I think, kind of unusual, right? In my review, one of the things I said is that there's some pacing. I think that there's basically it's kind of slow. They're not really with each other as much as I would like, but that this is a book I really enjoyed because I felt like it really, this book was probably written, again, pre-pandemic. It just has so much information about them as people and their families and, kind of who they are. It was really, really well done. So that's Strike a Match by Fiona Riley.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I want to shout out Victoria Dahl, who also doesn't write romance anymore, but she has a terrific novella called Fanning the Flames. This one is for everybody who's looking for heroines who are over 40.
That's right. That's right.
The heroine is a curvy librarian who's a single mom and over 40, and her ex-husband's friend, he is the fire captain. And it's in a small town, and the library and the firehouse share a building. And
yes.
It's my favorite part. It's so cute. She basically sits at the circulation desk and watches the firehouse do their morning runs outside, and he
Hunky
never
fireman.
wears a shirt, and she just salivates over him, but could never actually have him because he's friends with her ex-husband.
Yeah.
And he is obsessed with her. He just wants to get his hands on all of her curves, and it's very hot. And there's this great scene where they go home to her house where she lives with her teenage daughter, and they start to make out on the couch, and the teenage daughter comes home, and it's chaos, and it just sounds so it's so perfect and charming. And I think Victoria is just one of the best contemporary writers out there. Great. And if you have never read Victoria Dahl, but you are looking for just someone new to read in 2024 in contemporary, go to her because she writes a great romance. And then you'll just be sad with us at the end that now she writes really fantastic thrillers as Victoria Helen Stone.
Yeah.
And has just left the pool, but we still love her.
We still love her. Okay.
That is the end on my list.
All right. And I have one more novella. Was that one kind of a novella?
That was a novella, yeah.
Okay. I've been saving this one because it has honestly a title that makes it seem silly, and it's not silly at all. It's called Hottie, Scottie, and Mr. Porter by R. Cooper. Have you ever read R. Cooper?
No.
R. Cooper writes, I think, some of my favorite gay romances have been written by R. Cooper. She also wrote one about Thanksgiving, Vincent's Thanksgiving date, which I think is a gem. And often in her, and they're all novellas. I think she's just one of those writers where the sweet spot is 125 pages. Which I like because sometimes it's just, I don't know, they're so pure, right? There's just not a lot of extra. In this case, Scott is Korean American and has moved to this small town in Northern California. I mean rural Northern California, a couple hours north of San Francisco, where there's basically once you pass Sacramento, it's we're talking small towns. And I think one of the things I like about that is it's really exploring, like, even in a state like California where everyone just assumes that everything is awesome all the time, right? Scott is dealing not only with some like low-key, like straight up like that kind of paternalistic racism from the white women in town, but also like they out him when they, so he has moved up there to help his sister, who is, I think, divorced and has kids. And he is a fireman, and he is like, in his late 20s. He's about to turn 30. He's kind of like awkward. He's such an awkward baby. But he loves like working out. He eats really healthy. He talks about it all the time because he feels like, it's funny. I think his sister, somebody at some point, like, maybe it's in his point of view, I can't remember. Like, this was a way when he was in high school that he like kind of like made like conversation with the jocks. And then like realized actually he really loves like working out. Like he's constantly like running and talking about what he eats. And, and so the women in town just think he's like this himbo. Like literally like the opening scene is then like he's talking to this woman who's in charge of like, the knitting club or whatever. I don't think her name's Karen, but it's probably Karen. And she starts telling him that there's this one other gay man in town, Cole, who's a widow. And these women have decided it's time to start setting Cole up. And Scott, she does not know.
Classic straight lady.
Yes, right.
Saying,
like
I know
exactly.
one other gay person.
Yes,
you should be together.
Well, no, in this case, she's like, doesn't even think about Scott because Scott is just this like dumb himbo. And Cole is like the town's librarian and he has, wears bow ties and has refined tastes. And so like they're thinking about like kind of men outside, like, like she's kind of like, do you know anybody? And he's, he's like, this town doesn't have, Tinder or Grindr. And if it does, I mean, it's just like really, but what she does not know is that he and Cole had a hookup the year before, right? They had this real hot night together and then Cole kind of like disappears on him and Scott's like, they might think I'm dumb, but I'm not that dumb. Like, I know he doesn't want anything more from me. And so, every time they run into each other now, it's just like awkward and Scott's kind of pining for him. It's just, I think if you're a person who really comes to romance for like feelings with a capital F, you would love R. Cooper. Right? Like, because these are people who just like long for love and they just know who the object of their affection is, but they can be like, that's just hard and scary. And, and he's just like, I don't want to be part of like the gay power couple of this tiny little town. And they don't even think of me like that. And so, anyway, it's great. They, what happens is basically like the nosy straight ladies of this town, in fact, tried to start setting Cole up. And he's like, oh my God, what is happening? And so Scott and Cole are going to finally figure it out. But it's a great book. And Scott is a firefighter in the town. Again, like not a whole lot of firefighting on page, but the fire in his heart. Hottie, Scottie, and Mr. Porter.
Hottie, Scottie.
So perfect.
Well, I think we did the job.
I think so too.
I hope you all get hunky firefighters in your life whenever you need them. Yeah. Anything else? Do we have anything to say? Any news? We jumped right in.
Yeah, well, because we were so excited. No, I have no news, everybody.
No news. It's January. There's nothing.
It's January.
We're just doing the job.
I mean, we're just trying to keep everybody warm through the winter.
There you go. I see what you did there. I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels and I write them. And I'm here with my friend Jen Prokop, a romance reader and editor. And you can find us. We are Fated Mates. You can find us on fatedmates.net every Wednesday on your podcasting app. If you're listening to this in some way other than that, you can subscribe on your podcasting app. You can find us on Twitter at Fated Mates, on Instagram at Fated Mates Pod, on all the other things at variations of Fated Mates. We're doing our job here. We're just trying to figure out where everybody's landing, and then we'll land there with you. If you really enjoy listening to us talk about books and getting recommendations, you definitely want to be a part of our Discord. In order to do that, head over to our Patreon, patreon.com/fatedmates. And there you can access the Discord, and where there are people just shouting
Talking about
book
romance all the time
at you. Really.
We started the cutest thing yesterday. So Kelly, who's not my Kelly, a different Kelly, who said, I have a great idea for a new channel. And I'm always like, yes, let's hear it. And it's called The Daily Question. Oh. And it's just like a question that like someone posts in the day, and then like people just discuss it all day. And yesterday's was basically like, what's the first book you remember reading and loving as a child? Oh. And it was a delight to read.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so it's just like so fun because there's like obviously a lot of romance talk, but it's also just a lot of like friendly, like talking with other people who love romance about like themselves and who they are and all that kind of stuff. It's great.
You know what?
Discord's really fun.
I think about all the time. I loved when I was a kid. I wonder if I should get it for my daughter. I don't even remember, but Tuck Everlasting.
Oh yeah, sure. Because
I must have read that a million times, just over and over again. But I don't even know how old I would have been.
That's like a pretty classic 4th or 5th grade book.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna get it for her.
Sure. I mean, sure.
No,
because
is it weird?
No, kids. It's like the heartbreak, right? Isn't that the one where?
Yeah, they drink from the fountain of youth, and then he convinces the like teenage boy convinces her not to drink from it because she'll see everyone she loves die. Listen, right there. That's it.
Right
That's
there.
the button I got installed.
Well, I was saying like
I gotta go into Discord and tell him.
Yeah, I remember the first book I really loved. I still own it. Was my babysitter got me this, and I know it was like I was 5 because it says the year that she gave it to me for my birthday. This like book of fairy tales, this Dean's book of fairy tales. And like the illustrations were so beautiful. And I like read and reread. I mean, fairy tales, of course, with happily ever afters. Like I was obsessed with this book. I read it over and over again. I can vividly remember like the illustrations. Everyone looked really elven, with like little like pointy faces and ears and stuff. Oh, amazing.
Yeah. I don't remember picture books or any of that. I just remember like the first book I can remember, like I could see myself on my bed. That's it. It was Tuck Everlasting. Anyway, my friends, that's the story. That's us in a nutshell. Thanks, as always, to our advertisers and our sponsors. We're very grateful to you, and we'll see you next week.